do that. And it's in Tibetan. And the first two lines are for anybody in the room who already identifies with being a Buddhist. So it's kind of reminding you of your reliance on Buddha's ideas, that's what we're going to talk about. And the second two lines will be for all of us. It's kind of, the Tibetans would say you're setting your motivation. Well, we could say maybe we're stating our purpose for being here tonight for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. Let's see what happens. Why are we here? So let's to think about, to listen to these words, this advice from this person called Buddha, about how indeed to stay sane in a crazy world, you know, there's no question about that. And just sort of practical methods, practical approaches to that. And so to listen to it as advice, but remember that Buddha's not the boss, we are the boss, so you might like the advice and that's perfectly fine, but it's to listen to it as advice. Even if there's 1% of what you hear that you find useful, that's fantastic. To think that, and the advice for what? How to help you develop what for the Buddha is our unbelievable human potential. Buddha's got this marvellous, his own experiential understanding of the way the human mind works and the marvellous potential we've all got. So how to develop our marvellous potential for our sake, but also because we live in this crazy world together for the sake of others. So thinking like that. Sangye charam soke choknam la jangshu padudak nikyam suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charam soke choknam la jangshu padudak nikyam suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangshu padudak nikyam suchi dagi chernyen gibe sunam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay, so who is this Buddha? You know, it was a couple of years ago I read just in passing a sentence the Dalai Lama said, and he said it was these Indians more than 3,000 years ago who actually were the ones who began this incredible investigation into the nature of self. So that's the historical kind of context in which Buddha came. You know, we all kind of know he's Indian, but somehow we know. I think in our culture we don't know much about the Indians. We know all about the Greeks. You know, many of our fancy words are in Greek. We know little about India, but it's actually quite extraordinary if we understand what they were doing, because this gives us a real understanding of who the Buddha is and therefore what he's saying and where it comes from, this information, you know. So these Indians, they were these remarkable beings who, you know, more than 3,000 years ago, who actually were these great thinkers, yogis, philosophers, and they were the ones who actually created this extraordinary psychological skill that these days, broadly speaking, in our culture is known as mindfulness meditation, or at least what we call mindfulness meditation. Lots of variations of this technique, coming from this extraordinary technique invented by these Indians. And so it's one of the central techniques still today among anybody who's a Buddhist, anybody who's seriously practicing. So what this technique is, which is what indicates these Indians, these extraordinary beings, it's a skill that actually enables you to get this extraordinarily subtle focus in your mind, to enables you to access these subtler levels of your own mind. And this is advanced. Most of us might not achieve that in this life. And on the basis of their own experiential findings, these great beings, they come up with certain findings, certain views about what the person is, who is the person, what is self. In fact, you know, it's actually, they came from this worldview of what the way the world is, what is happiness, what is suffering. So Buddha came out of this marvelous tradition, and then he then diverged in his own direction, in particular in relation to his own findings, experiential findings, internal findings about the way a person exists, the way the mind exists, what it is, and then from this we now have what's called Buddhism. So the key thing about the Buddha then is that he's not a creator. One of the major points, I think, for us in understanding the Buddhist spiritual approach, you know, our usual view of religion, you know, I'm a nun, there's a holy picture here, I just sang a prayer, it sounds like religion, sounds like spiritual, and it is in that way, but there's some really crucial difference that implies the way that a person would use Buddhism if they chose to use it. And that is that Buddha is not a creator. Buddha came out of this tradition. He, from his own experience, came to various conclusions internally about the way the mind is, what is possible, what is our potential. And so basically he talks about a mind. He doesn't talk about a soul. He doesn't have a word like spirit or in Buddhism. And he's not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. So that means he was this regular guy who, from his own hard work, came to various observations himself. So one of the default, I think, assumptions we all have about spiritual information is it comes from on high. It's revelation, you know. I mean, I see around the world, we all ask the same questions, and I find that very fascinating. We all ask the same questions, but there's only one question I've ever had from one person. And in fact, it was a scientist in New Zealand, and he said, who revealed these teachings to the Buddha? Which is a perfectly correct question if you have the usual view of a creative religion. And I said, nobody. I said, I said, he's like Einstein insofar as whatever Einstein came up with, it wasn't revealed to him. He didn't have a dream about it. He didn't have a vision of it. It didn't speculate. He didn't make it up. He actually used his own intelligence, and he observed certain things, and he presents his findings about relativity, for example. I said, Buddha is identical to that. Now, that's a shock when we hear this, because we know Buddha talks about reincarnation, he talks about, all these things, things that aren't in our culture. So we assume, we have this default assumption, it's religious, it's from revelation, and therefore can't be proved, and therefore is belief. So technically you could say, Buddhism is not that. It isn't a belief system. It's actually Buddha explaining what he has found, again, from his own experience. But the point is, because he asserts these much subtler levels of consciousness, he doesn't use the word soul, like I said, subtler, more subtle levels of mind or consciousness that can be accessed, that enable us to then develop this marvellous potential we've all got. So he's actually talking about the mind. You would say he is a psychologist, except his view of the mind is so radically different, you might as well use another word, So the fact is, if he was a regular guy who came to who came up with these various things, he's either, the assumption is it's come from his experience. It's not something that was revealed to him. So therefore, if he's a regular guy who came to these conclusions, then the assumption is clearly, my being a regular guy, I can do it too. That's the idea. So therefore, it's a hands-on, experiential path if we do it properly. So for the Buddhist idea that's saying you believe it, do we believe in karma? Do we believe in reincarnation, for example? That's technically not the right question, So for example, you wouldn't say, do you believe in mathematics? But people would laugh at you. Well, I'm happy if you do believe in mathematics, but you've got to use it, you've got to know how it works, then you can use it. It's okay to believe in it works, So this is the appropriate approach in Buddhism. Therefore, so the way to listen to it, and this is the way I say, I never use the word I believe in Buddhism, believe in reincarnation, these things. But I say it's my working hypothesis, and I find that a very reasonable approach. In a sense, I'm prepared to, I'm working with it one step at a time, and like Einstein, if you go one step at a time, you check the boxes, you make it your own experience, and therefore you validate it each step of the way. Well, and you're prepared to find Einstein wrong. Well, the same here, I'm prepared to find Buddha wrong, So it's like a one step at a time involvement, to the degree that you wish to be involved. So, I've jumped in the deep end. I like the whole big Buddhist view, So let's look then at what he says about the mind, because that's the essential thing as far as he's concerned. And what this potential is that we've all got. And the practical approach to how to cultivate that potential slowly, and therefore the implications of all that, So the crucial finding of the Buddha, this is indicated by actually the Tibetan word, come on in. Please, someone take care of him. Come on, please. You go. Just take care of him. Yeah, okay. So, it's interesting, the Tibetan word for the word Buddha, which is Sanskrit, the Tibetan word, the etymology of it's really tasty. It's the word sangye. And the first syllable, sang, implies the total eradication from our mind, our very being, of all the neuroses, all ego, fears, attachment, anger, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem. These words that we know totally and that we naturally assume, and that all our Buddhist And all our materialist models of mind assume are the most normal parts of a normal human being. No, for the Buddha, he has found from his own experience that this stuff, as they say in Buddhist psychology, is adventitious. It's not at the core of our being. And he says himself that he has these methods where he has rid from his own mind this stuff. Now, that's a pretty kind of radical concept. I mean, if I go to one of you who's a therapist and I ask you to please give me methods to get rid of all neuroses, all fear, all depression, all anxiety, all the time, and then not only that, but the second syllable, yay, that implies the development literally to perfection of all the other stuff inside us, the stuff that we know as the good stuff, intelligence, joy, kindness, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, love, these words. We know this stuff. Buddha uses these very simple words, He says that stuff is at the core of our being and therefore can be cultivated to a degree that would blow our minds. So if you were the therapist and I come to you and I'd ask you for methods to please help me get rid of all rubbish, all delusions, all ego, all fear, and develop infinite love and kindness all the time for all beings, my feeling is you'll think I'm mentally ill. I mean, quite literally and quite simply, So we don't hear Buddhism in this blunt kind of way. We hear these sort of notions called, samsara, nirvana, as if some kind of alternative to heaven or something. But the word nirvana actually, or the word Buddha, this word Buddha, it's referring to this capacity of the mind. That's what Buddha's saying. So that's long term. Don't hold your breath, But I think the implication of this is the most profound one. Is that forget whether you even want to achieve to that degree. But the crucial thing that's implied by this is that we can change our minds. That we're not stuck. We're not set. There's this stuff that we know causes us so much pain. No causes us freak outs, all the anxiety, the panic attacks, the depression, ordinary levels, forget extreme levels, the stuff that we assume is at the core of our being. We assume it's at the core of our being. We just assume this is who I am. And we even, I think it is, our models of the mind talk about these states of mind as being normal components of a normal human being. We've got, as long as we have a bit of anger, a bit of jealousy, a bit of fear, a little bit of love and intelligence, hopefully more of the latter than the former, then you're a normal human being. And I think what we mean by that is that anger and depression and anxiety and panic and worry and fears are so normal that you'd be abnormal if you didn't have them. Which is why if we hear what Buddha's suggesting, what he says he himself has found, and he has presented his methodology, for us to do the same job, it's pretty shocking, quite radical psychologically. But this is exactly what he's saying. So clearly, then you'd have to ask the question, why would you want to get rid of all attachment or anger or fear? Because initially it's quite hard to hear this. We can't conceive of such a person. We would be really considered mentally ill if we didn't have those. So it needs a bit of kind of reconfiguring to try and even understand what he's saying, what he means by this. And it to have only the positive qualities. It sounds like a peculiar person. So then what would be the reason, if he has found this to be so, why would you want to even lessen depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, anger, and the rest? Well, I think it's fairly evident. The Buddha's essential point is that this is the stuff in every one of us, to whatever degree, that is the source of our pain, the source of our suffering. And that the other stuff, the kindness, the intelligence, and all this is the source of our happiness. Speaking in the most simple terms, Clearly it's more nuanced than just that. This is the essence of the Buddhist approach. And in fact, Buddhist psychology is this really interesting kind of model. And this again is coming first of all from these Indians. They basically, where this information comes from, isn't from mapping the brain, as we would say. I mean, our view in our culture, of course, is the mind is the brain, and we learn about the brain. These marvelous neuroscientists, map the brain. Well, these guys, including the Buddha, mapped the mind internally. And that's quite a shock, because we don't have methods like that. And we're talking about mind at a subtle level. We don't have concepts like that. So this is what I'm saying about this technique, this rigorous, really disciplined, rigorous psychological skill that is a central technique in Buddhism that enables us to access these subtle levels. And in order to unpack and unravel the contents, to do this job that Buddha says we can all do slowly, at least lessen, if not get rid of, the neuroses, the misery, the fears, the nonsense, the misconceptions, the delusions. These are all synonyms in Buddhist psychology. And grow the good stuff. I mean, speaking very simply, So because Buddha's not a creator, And therefore, and as far as Buddha's concerned, we don't need creating. He's got his own very detailed explanation of who we are and where we come from. This is this business of reincarnation and karma. We probably won't go into that tonight. Certainly over the weekend we will. And having this view of who, you know, this view of who we are, where we come from, there is no concept of a creator, and therefore you think about it, there's no concept of punishment and reward. And as soon as we hear about blame and anger and guilt and fear, we have this dualistic view. And as soon as we hear, I've got lots of anger, I'm very jealous, there's this kind of guilt that takes over, you know, like we're a naughty person. Well, there's no view, in a sense, there's no view like that. Well, there is, but the Buddha's saying, you're not a naughty person. He says, actually, we should be having compassion for ourselves when we recognize these states of mind. So the key point here for the Buddha, this actually initially is quite hard to hear, I think, is that these states of mind, you know, the unhappy ones, they're the source of our pain, and the positive ones are the source of our happiness. So now we know, if you check yesterday and you were jealous and depressed and this and that, you know that was miserable. But then when I say to you, tell me about yesterday, what happened? You'll say I was jealous, depressed, miserable, angry, and then what you'll do is give me a detailed description of the event or the person or the thing that happened that, as far as we're all concerned, is the cause, and we mean the main cause of that anger, that depression, that jealousy. And why are you, oh, you're happy today? Wow, Robina, what's happened today? And you'll proceed to tell me exactly the good things that happened. The nice weather, the this, the that, all the lights were green, the traffic was great, the food was delicious. So in other words, we have this default view, and I think it's actually, again, it's our philosophical position, and it's default. No one teaches us this. That absolutely, without doubt, the main causes of what goes on inside here are out there. This is an absolute certainty, I think, for all of us. And this is a simple point from the Buddha that he fundamentally disagrees with. He's not saying the outside world doesn't play a role. Everything on this planet is interdependently existent. Everything that occurs in our daily life will have an impact. But the simple point that Buddha's making, and it's not a moralistic issue, the simple point is that he says what goes on in here is the source, the main source of whether I'm happy or suffering. It is not the external event. And this goes to great depth in Buddhist psychology and philosophy, the explanation of this. So the implications of this are kind of tasty, you know. But basically, we can change our mind. There's a saying in Buddhism, you can change something, well, please change it. But what if you can't? That's when the hard work starts. That's why, you know, for me, I mean, you know, Lauren mentioned Liberation Prison Project. It was 23 years ago or something. I got a letter from a young man in prison from Los Angeles. And he'd read a book of Lama Yeshe, who was actually, he happens to be my teacher. And he was moved by the talk of compassion. And so then from that grew this particular project that we call Liberation Prison Project. We received letters from people in prison, and we provided, you know, Buddhist tools for those who wanted them, books, advice, things like this, you know. So the thing that I found so moving from that, and for me is such a stark, perfect example in this conversation here, really making the point that Buddha's making, is that when you're in, you know, we know ourselves that we're in my friend's in prison, you can't change the outside. You don't have a key. You cannot open that door. You can't you can't throw your roommate out, you know. You can't change. Your back up is against the wall. And so you know, that's when the people I knew in prison who chose to use these tools to whatever degree they wanted, you know, that was much more powerful. And for me, the learning was so powerful. That when you can't change the outside, but you can change the inside. So one example I always use, an extreme example, you know, was a woman I read about in prison. I didn't know her. She was in Florida. I happened to look briefly at her memoir. This is many years ago, 30 plus years ago, I think. She was hitching. She said she was this hippie. She's out now. This hippie with a hippie husband, 3 hippie kids, hitching in Florida, and they get picked up by 2 guys, I think, and the guys got picked up by 2 cops, and the guys kill the cops and blame the hippies. So they're on death row in Florida. I think she was in prison for 17 years, and the husband got executed. Now think of that for a second, you know. You look at when you're accused of even breaking that cup when you wash the dishes, it's like you're in a nightmare, you know. You can't believe this person thought you did this terrible thing. And so much anguish for us to try and prove that we didn't do it, you know. Well, can you imagine that one? You can't conceive of this, you know. And this, for me, this is such an extreme example. Can someone take care of you? she at some point, you know, she tried everything in her power to change this environment, to try and convince people that they didn't do this thing, you know. And she said at some point, she said, I realized I could not change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So now we love to hear things like this. It's so moving to hear it. But you put yourself for 1 second in an environment like that, you know. The natural thing we would assume, and this again is supported, this whole approach is supported in our psychology. That, you know, at the same, that it would be natural to go completely out of your mind. It would be natural to have complete rage. It would be natural to be depressed. It would be natural to want to kill yourself or to kill everybody else. And then we'd understand, because we would believe, we would assume that she was suffering because of what happened. But there she was, recognizing this point that in fact Buddha happens to say, and the fact is, because Buddha's not a creator, he doesn't own this approach. He didn't make it up. You know, this is a universal truth as far as the Buddha is concerned. It's a natural law that we can change our mind. I think she did yoga and things in prison. I don't remember. But that's, to me, so outrageous. And this is the point here. Forget even the Buddha's view of karma, reincarnation, whatever. Forget his deep descriptions of the way we come into being and all this. But here, the simple point, the practical point, is that we can change the way we see things. And that's what Buddha means by the mind. What goes on in the mind is a series of conceptions about things that are also packed with emotions, you know. And because we have this deep instinctive belief that I'm angry because she did this, I'm jealous because he did this, I'm happy because she said that. This is the view we have without question. So when you hear something like that, we know it's true. We know we do this every day ourselves. You know, you're annoyed with somebody, but you decide not to say anything, you change your mind. We do it all the time. So we don't really join the dots and see how powerful it is. And this is the essential point that Buddha's making. Forget all the other bigger stuff. You know, this is the actual simple point that he's making. But this takes unbelievable courage of how you would define a negative action or a positive action. These are words that seem on the surface really kind of a bit simplistic or even moralistic, but this is the basis of all the Buddhist view of the mind. We've got these, in the Buddhist model, which we'll go into in a minute, we've pointed it out already, you know, the contents of our mind, there are thousands of thoughts, thousands of this, of our mind. We know they're all going, never stopping, and it seems like a massive emotional soup, isn't it? So the Buddhist view is it's deceptively kind of simple, like I said. Divide all the contents into so-called negative, neurotic, ego-based states of mind, which are the source of our pain, which he has found we can get rid of long-term. There are positive, virtuous, useful, appropriate, beneficial, spacious, good states of mind, which are the source of our happiness, which we can develop to perfection. And then there's a third lot, which I like to call the mechanics of the mind. Concentration, you know, good memory, lots and lots of these, and they really talk about this in great detail in Buddhist psychology. And these can be developed and honed in this single point of concentration meditation technique. So the first ones are the neurotic, deluded ones. The second are the positive, virtuous, useful ones. And don't hear it as moralistic. This is the basis of all the discussion of morality and everything in Buddhism, including karma and everything. And it's all related to happiness and suffering. So the third lot are, you know, good memory, for example. So a term for that in Buddhism, I'm just going to mention this, is mindfulness. But we get all these weird ideas of what we think mindfulness is, but it just means not forgetting what you're doing moment by moment. So we know ourselves very well. You think, oh, I must go to the fridge and get some milk. And you're halfway through to the kitchen, you go, oh, what was I doing? We know this, right? That state of mind is called mindfulness. We put all these holy bells and whistles onto it. It's literally the ability to not forget what you're doing. And that is absolutely what has to be developed in single point of concentration. So we can discuss this later. So as Lama Zopa said one time, well, thieves need mindfulness. I think someone who was a Vipassana meditation person got insulted by that, thought that was insulting Vipassana meditation. No, it's a practical thing. So whether you're a monster or a meditator, you need good mindfulness, you need good concentration. But love and compassion and kindness are the basis of happiness, and anger and fears and jealousy and neurosis are the basis of suffering. And Buddha's view is based upon this idea we all want happiness and don't want suffering. And all he's saying is, well, listen guys, I've got some methods for you of how to get happiness and how to stop suffering. It's a way of framing all of Buddha's teachings, actually. Which sounds, again, like I'm saying, simplistic, but it's not. So, okay, then Buddha's general deal is, this is the karmic one, we're going to go into more detail later, a so-called negative action is an action that you do with your body and speech, this is roughly speaking, that will harm another. So killing is one of those, that's pretty clear. Lying is one of those, stealing is one of those. You can see that, they harm others, pretty obvious. They're not negative, remember, because Buddha says so, it's not like that. Because he says, it's, you know, you can do your market research in this room and you're going to do a quick little bit of market research. We can prove within 3 seconds that people don't like getting killed, don't like getting lied to, don't like getting stolen from. Well, that's, well, the Buddha proves it's a negative action. Right there. There it is. It hurts people. Don't like it. Dogs and monkeys the same. Check their behaviour when you try to take their food, you know. So then, but then it gets to become more nuanced. Then a positive action, you know, is one that benefits another. Check how you feel when someone gives you a gift. It speaks kindly to you, forgives you. We know what that feels like. This is kind of primordially basic, really basic. And much of, like I'm saying, we can frame all of Buddha's teachings on karma, Buddha's philosophy, Buddha's metaphysics, Buddha's psychology on this principle of everybody wants happiness, everybody doesn't want suffering. And what Buddha's saying is, hey guys, I've got some methods for you of how to get happiness and stop suffering. This is all the wisdom we work. The nuts and bolts of, you know, the tools, using Buddha's tools and how to do this for yourself first. This often sounds selfish to us, you know, oh, I should be helping others. Yeah, that's the compassion wing, on the basis of the wisdom wing. So, okay, the starting point then, if Buddha, you know, in junior school grade level, grade 1 junior school level, entry level Buddhism, he says, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't this, don't that, 7 little baby things he starts with of the body and the speech. We ought to ask the question, just like the doctor, when you say, she says, don't eat sugar, your natural question is, well, why not? That's reasonable. You should ask. You should just say, oh, all right, I won't eat sugar. Why aren't you eating sugar, Robina? Oh, I don't know, the doctor said. Why? I don't know. That's stupidity. So ask Buddha, why not? Why shouldn't I kill Buddha? Very reasonable question. Well, here's his answer, like I said here. It's an action that if you do it, it'll harm another. But the point, that is the definition of it. But the point here, at this level of practice, why he exhorts us not to do it, like I said here, because you program, it'll harm you, Robina. It'll harm you. It's like eating sugar. It'll harm you in the future. It'll harm you. It'll bring you suffering. You, by you, because why? So now let's look at the logic. Why is that so? Please explain, Buddha. So this is the explanation. Of course, this is just theory here, like I said, you know. Because what you can do is start with a theory, and it's up to you to think it through, you know. So, okay, then let's just take a simple example, and this could be the same for a positive action, one that benefits another. So good, let's look at a positive action, because karma applies to both, you know. So a positive action would be, let's say, called being generous to a poor person. Let's just say, let's say. So there's 4, so for any action, the details about karma go into great, you know, we'll discuss more. But there's a way of, what is it? There's an action that will be called a complete action. And for a complete action, we'll sort of put a seed into your mind that will ripen in the future as a type of rebirth. Karma, you know, we'll go into this in more detail. Then there have to be 4 things in place when you do it. So in relation to an action of generosity, simple example. There have to be 4 things. Well, the first is the object of your action, a poor person. Well, let's say there's Lucas. Let's say Lucas is on the street and he's a poor person. So he's the object of the action. There's got to be that, you know. The first one is the object. Second, there's your mind involved in it, and this is the main part. And there's 3 bits there. So like 2A is, there's got to be in your mind, there's one of these neutral states of mind that's called discrimination. I've got to have this ability to see that's the homeless person that I will give money to. Discrimination, that is the object. 2, intention, bare bones. And this is the actual meaning in Buddhism of the word karma. It's mental action. It starts with the mind. Karma runs in the mind, it plays out in the mind, and it's created by the mind. Its servants are the body and speech, clearly. There's got to be the intention, and that means I will give $50 to that homeless person. Intention. Intention is the start of everything. Even by walking out that door. If you see me stand up and walk in that direction, you have to deduce that there's the thought, I will walk out that door. It's kind of obvious. We don't join the dots, you know. Intention is the first step. Intention is I will. That's the meaning of karma. Everything goes from there. So the third part of your mind involved, and this is the really crucial piece, is the motivation that informs the intention. I will give $50 to that homeless person. What's the motivation? Well, a typical virtuous action, the motivation would be a virtuous one. Generosity, compassion. That's pretty reasonable. We get that. But intention and motivation are so packed together, we often don't distinguish them. This is a really crucial point. The third part, first is object. Second, this 2A, recognition, is the one. 2B, intention. 2C, motivation. There it is. Third, I do the action. Get out the $50, hand it to him. 4, he gets the $50. Result. That's a complete action of generosity. It would apply the same to killing, a negative action. First, there's the object, a mouse. Second, my mind involved in it. First is recognition, that is the mouse. Second, intention, I will kill the mouse. Motivation, disgust, aversion, what else? Third, do the action. 4, dead mouse. Complete action of killing. Drops a seed in my bank vault. What various bank vaults where our karmic seeds go into. This is natural, Buddha says. No one's making this happen. No one's running this. This is Buddha's observation from his own mind of what happens. It's his observation about this law called the law of karma. It's a natural law. No one runs it. No one made it up. So clearly, to observe this demands a certain subtle level of mind, which is Buddha is indicating that he has accomplished, and which we can accomplish too. So positive actions, negative actions, same logic. A complete action has those 4 parts, but the crucial piece is the mind involved. So I'll give the example. Let's say I'm walking down the street and there's a homeless person. So that's the object, number 1. But number 2, my mind involved in it. The recognition, that is the person I will give $50 to. No, that doesn't arise because I don't notice. He's a homeless person. 2, intention to give $50. No, there's no intention because I don't notice him. 3, motivation. No, because there's no mind involved. So my mind is not involved. But 3, $50 falls out of my pocket and falls on the ground in front of Lucas. That can happen. And number 4, he gets the $50. Well, 1, 3, and 4 were there. But I don't create any karma because I didn't recognize it's him. I didn't intend to do it, and therefore there was no motivation. 0 karma. He gets his $50. He's happy. But I don't create any karma whatsoever. Can you hear that? Karma is made by the mind. That's why the mind for the Buddha is central every time. Your body and speech simply carry out the wishes in your mind. And this is the same with a negative action of killing. 1, the object, a mouse. 2, recognition, that is the mouse I will kill. No. 2B, intention, I will kill that mouse. No, I don't see the mouse. 3, motivation, there's no motivation, I don't see the mouse. So my mind is not involved at all. But 3, my foot goes on the mouse. 4, dead mouse. 0 karma of mind. I could be there blind drunk beating up Lucas. Negative karma of being blind drunk beating up Lucas, but no negative karma of killing because my mind didn't observe it or see it or intend to do it. So it's quite precise and subtle, and this is happening. The Buddha is saying we're creating karmas 1,000,000 times a second. This is highly sophisticated, subtle, nuanced process that's going all the time. Which obviously, again, is, if it is observed by the Buddha, we're talking about his mind being quite subtle to observe this. But this is the point, not just he's made it up. It's not like So it goes into detail like this. So the logic of what a negative action is one that in general harms another. But if you do, what causes you to create a negative action in your mind, that isn't the fact that it harms another. That's these 4 things in place. The generous action as well. A positive action is one that benefits another. But if my $50 falls out and I don't see it or think to do it, then I don't create any virtuous karma. There's no programming in my mind. There's no plan in my mind. There's no intention in my mind. So my mind is not being programmed to do anything. And karma essentially is this programming process that starts in the mind. And that's why we have to learn to know the mind so we can start to be in charge of the process of developing the person that we want to become by changing our mind and therefore also changing our actions of body and speech. It's a totally hands-on job. And this is why, from the Buddhist perspective, we should want to know our minds, because it runs the show. Are we communicating here? This theory of Buddha? What about you back there?
Even for me.
Good. What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff, thank you, Jeff. So all I'm doing is trying to present to you an ordinary, down-to-earth Australian language, American language, this view of the Buddhism. Okay, so now this is the reason, because whatever we think of doing safe in the Buddha is programming us, sow seeds in the mind, without exception. Every millisecond we're sowing seeds, because as long as you're existing, your mind is working. Even in your dreams, you're sowing seeds. You know, as long as your mind's functioning, it's doing things. This is called creating karma. So therefore, it's got zero to do with punishment or reward. There's nobody running it. It's not like a big stick you use to beat yourself, because we usually hear it only in terms of negative karma. You know, we love to focus on the negative. So the Buddha's fundamental principle of this law of karma, cause and effect. He's not talking about the cause and effect of roses or flowers or iPads. He's talking about the cause and effect of happiness and suffering. That's his thing. And he says, we are the ones, each sentient being, that ant, that dog, that human, that monkey. We are the ones at this moment experiencing the fruits of our own past programming. And every millisecond we are sowing the seeds to produce our future experiences. So all he's saying is, given that we're doing it to ourselves, which is absolutely not what we think it's God's fault. You know, Italians have very rude words for blaming God. I don't know if you're Italian or not. But one Argentinian guy said, well, we're even worse than the Italians. Mm-hmm. But I remember Lamieshi, when he visited one of his monk friends in the hospital in Italy, it was back in the 80s, and the Italian boys were translating for Lama all these rude things the Italian guys in the ward were saying about God. I mean, I was a Catholic. I would never criticise God. But God is a pig, you know. And apparently Our Lady's a whore. We call her Our Lady, the mother of God, you know. And the Argentinians said it were even worse than the Italians. Anyway, we don't like to blame God, but we love to blame Mummy and Daddy. That fits in our culture. Well, Buddha says, no blame. Don't put blame, it's too heavy. You got diabetes, darling, because you didn't even realise. You know, you're eating all that sugar. You couldn't see the consequences of the actions, you know. And Buddha's saying this, and this is the basis of having compassion for the Buddha, that we are all actually creating ourselves every second, but we don't realise, because we think it's everybody else doing it to us. That's the schizophrenia of it, you know. So this is the reason for the Buddha, practical reason, practical, to want to control our body and speech first. Then that gives us the luxury of having space to start to do the real job of being our own therapist, working on our mind, reprogramming, reconfiguring the very person we are to produce the person we want to become. Because he happens to say, given that our mind didn't start in our mother's womb, given that our mind doesn't come from mummy or daddy or creator, and given that it can't come from nothing, nothing can come from nothing. Nothing can just pop out of nowhere. It's a process of cause and effect. And because it's a process of cause and effect, you can't have necessarily a first cause. You can't have such a thing. We desperately want one. Again, we can just discuss intellectually this concept for the rest of the day. I won't go into it, it doesn't matter. Well, it's interesting. We assume there must be a first moment somewhere. When did it begin? When did I begin? When did suffering begin? When did karma begin? Buddha says, what a silly idea. That's why, you know, the Buddha would have this, never mind. So, because if this moment of something is the fruit of something before, this cup, it didn't fall out of a tree, we know that. It's the result of a series of previous causes. And then the clay that it came from is the result of a series of previous causes. And the water that mixed with the clay is the result of previous causes, and so it goes. And we want to find the first one, but by definition, if you find a first one, that implies it didn't have a cause. So the whole logical cause and effect collapses in a heap of nonsense. So Buddha's view is, this is Sane to us, that our consciousness, every individual being's consciousness, is a beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments. And that sounds pretty cosmic, I agree. So we'll just leave it there. Taking our hypothesis here, okay? So, okay. So the one of abiding by the laws of karma then, which then implies wanting to start to work on your mind. And this is the view try to be cultivated, which is the one that it's like a keep saying this for the same reason. It's like the reason you would want to stop eating sugar, the reason you would want to stop smoking cigarettes, is because you do not want suffering. It's for your sake. You don't sit there thinking, I must not eat sugar for everybody else's sake. It's too grand and ridiculous. You'll get to compassion eventually, but you've got to have compassion for yourself first. So this is, in a sense, abiding by the laws of karma is like having compassion for yourself. Because it's recognizing that I am the producer of me, and you know what, Robina? I'm up to here with suffering. I don't want to get harmed, lied to, stolen from, killed, have neurotic habits, keep being mean, miserable, have bad things happen. I don't want that. No way. No way. I'm sick of suffering. So of course there's a theory in the beginning. You've got to take it as a hypothesis. But eventually Buddha says as we get more subtle mind and get more developed, we'll be able to see the truth of it quite literally, which is what he's done. So it's one step at a time. So abiding by the laws of karma, behaving nicely, speaking very simply, is the basis of a good practice. And it has the bonus also, we all know this, discipline for us, we all know discipline's a powerful thing. It's a marvellous tool. Our greatest regret is because we're so lazy. We start for a while, go on a diet, then we give up, you know. We go to the gym for a while, we give up. We start a new habit, a series of habits, we give up. We fall into the trap of our comfort zone, don't we? We become lazy. We know the benefits of discipline. Well, here it's the discipline of controlling our body and speech. And again, honestly, we could spend the rest of the day just on this one. 2 days we could. Because it's so powerful, actually, but we don't sort of see it as powerful. So the one I think of speech is pretty intense, actually. I mean, most of us might not run around killing and raping too many people, okay? Possibly not. But look at our speech. And this is why I think in our culture, speech is not considered a pretty big deal, you know. If you steal $5, you go to prison. If you lie, you're not going to go to prison for lying. It's not against the law, you know. Well, certain times it possibly might be. Or bad-mouthing people, you know, this gets very bad. But generally speech we think, you know, is a big deal. But if we look at even this one, Buddha's exhorting us to try and control saying words that aren't true, using harsh speech, abusing people, saying bad things about people behind their back. We're just rabbiting on about nothing, you know. Again, don't hear it moralistically. It's advice for oneself. For me to want to control what comes out of my mouth. First, recognizing that actions would harm others, but the basis of my wish first to refrain from them isn't because I want to be seen to be a good girl, isn't because I don't want to get punished. It's because I am sick of the suffering of my uncontrolled berserk speech, let's say, you know, the suffering it causes me. So my sense is, forget even the future suffering. That's the Buddha's deal about karma. It's way more subtle. It goes into the future. But right now, I mean, it sort of seems like not rocket science. That if you spend the day, you know, shouting at a red light, abusing Mr. Trump, swearing about this person, bad-mouthing your husband to your sister, bad-mouthing your sister to your brother, bad-mouthing your boss to the colleague, which we think is kind of innocuous. Well, I'm allowed to do that, we'll say, you know. Especially if no one hears you say the bad words about them, if you're just saying it to a friend who agrees with you, we can't even think, how can that be negative? It sounds like ridiculous, you know. Forget anything else, forget long term. Again, the Buddhist point is so obvious. Whatever we do, forget what we think, but whatever we do, it produces effects in yourself. So surely it's fairly obvious. If I spend my day shouting angry words or jealous words or whatever, is it not kind of obvious that I'd be exhausted by the end of the day? I'd be drained and exhausted. Now, I think it's everybody else's fault because they're how bad they are. Of course I have to be angry with them. Of course the policeman said I have to be mad at him. Of course Mr. Trump, he's a terrible man, I have to get angry with him. So we keep blaming the outside objects, and we think they're the cause of why I'm drained by the end of the day. Well, Buddha suggests very simply, no, Robina, they're not the cause of your problem. This is your uncontrolled speech, baby. And the uncontrolled speech, of course, comes from your uncontrolled mind, which is called anger. So all he's saying is, it's for one's own benefit. Not in a moralistic sense. Not because I want to be a good girl and get praised. Not because I don't want to get punished, which is the usual impulse. But it's from one's own, it's like, again, I keep repeating, it's for my own mental health, my own sanity. Seems so logical if you think about it. And of course the bonus is you're not harming anybody else. Wow, how marvellous. Not killing, for example. Attempting, and the Buddhists would attempt not to even kill that ant, that louse, that flea, that mouse, not to mention the husband. Understand? But it takes time for this one to have this as your basis, your decision to use this as the basis of your daily life for your own sake. It's working non-stop. In other words, and this is why Buddha says the natural law. So it's just the same way that, out there, given the way our world is, we have a thing called the law of botany, isn't it? That given the certain air temperature, the certain water, the certain amount of soil where you are, and then seeds in the ground, and things grow. Now, a botanist didn't make that up. This is a major point again about the natural law business. No one made that up. But some people with clever minds have come along and have observed the workings of that natural law and articulated it. That's called the science of botany. We get that. And we're geniuses at that. And we can see you can learn that science through an unbelievably subtle, sophisticated way. Look at all the genetic business now, in the vegetables. Are we communicating here? Look at mathematics. Nobody created mathematics, but that clever Arab fellow, came along and invented that new system from 0 to 9 to get rid of that silly Italian lot of the X's and the V's or whatever they used. What can you do with that? But to hear the point, that clever fellow did not invent mathematics. Since the beginning of this time, there were always 2 trees over there, but we just didn't call it 2. But there's always been that. So it's a natural law. And then clever people with their clever minds can observe that law and articulate it. And then once you've got that law and you can articulate it, you can use it to your advantage and grow beautiful gardens and build 100-story buildings. This is what Buddha says about the law of karma. This is quite a shock to us because we're so used to hearing it as a belief and as religious and made up by somebody. This is what's fascinating. Buddha says he's observed this. And what he's observed? Consciousnesses, minds of sentient beings. That's what he's saying. And that he's observed this is the law that runs the universe. And this law plays out in the minds and lives of sentient beings. Botany plays out in, the earth. This is what Buddha's saying. Sounds interesting from that perspective, but just a belief. He didn't create it. There's no concept like that. But every millisecond, what any sentient being thinks and does and says produces results in that mind of that sentient being. Future, 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 future. Long term, So, okay, the roughly way of describing this process, and there are 4 ways in which our past actions, karma means action, will ripen in the present, or indeed is ripening each moment, and therefore will ripen in the future based upon what we do now. So those 4 ways are this. The first one is the very type of rebirth we get. So in our case, we're called human. Well, the Buddha's deal would be just to get a human body. It's like winning the lottery, A few weeks before our consciousness found our way to our mother's present human womb, this consciousness of ours, obviously at a subtle level, was in another body. And at the time of our death, and in Vajrayana especially, they go into great detail about the death process. And it's a very... one of the books I've finished editing that's published now is how to help the others at the time of death. And we might go into this. It's very fascinating. But it's dealt with in great detail, the death process. Exactly what happens at each stage, when the mind leaves the body, so on and so forth. It's most fascinating. So we can deduce that at the time of our past death, these various karmic seeds that were in our bank vault, if you like. Clearly, Buddha did not discuss bank vaults. This is my analogy. Because nothing goes astray. Everything we think and do and say programmed in our consciousness. So the first way, before we even stop breathing in the past life, probably no more than 7 weeks, they say, before we came to our present mother's womb, our mind was another body. Could have been an animal, human, whatever. So one of the seeds that was triggered was a very powerful virtuous karmic seed, a seed of morality, which is meaning practice in the context. Well, as long as Opa says, the seed that was triggered, one seed that was triggered before we stopped breathing, that programmed us to go to our present mother's human womb, was practiced, no doubt, in the context of a very strong practice of spiritual practice. even living in the context of vows of morality, a very potent seed that was triggered even before we stopped breathing, that already programming us to go to our present mother's human womb several weeks later. At the same time, we're triggered the millions of other seeds now that are produced. The second way our karma is ripening is all the personality traits we've got, our own characteristics, our personality, our tendencies. All of these were triggered at the same time, which would produce our personality, which is again the Buddhist point. Your mummy and daddy did not give you love and hate and music and all the rest. They're your own tendencies triggered before you even left the past life. So your tendency to be good at music, to not lie or kill or steal or whatever it might be. We can all see we've got our little personalities since we're tiny. We can recognise, tendency to be angry, tendency to be good at football, tendency to be very good at mathematics, to be loving, to kill. Look at ourselves. We've all got. Okay, these tendencies were triggered, these seeds were triggered, and these are basically a bunch of habits from having done these before. The second track of karma, 4 tracks if you like. The third lot of karmic seeds that were triggered at the same time, they're called experiences similar to the cause. So that's roughly this one is all the seeds from our past actions in relation to sentient beings. We're very social beings, aren't we? So the time we conceive, we are born in another human's body, We have mummies and daddies and siblings and aunties and neighbours and the rats and the cockroaches. They're all these sentient beings we interact with in our lives. So none of this is random, Buddha says. If this is a natural law, it's the logic of it, as shocking as this is to us. Because it's such a new concept that we haven't heard it before. If karma is a natural law, then it's logical. It can be known and it can't be random. Nothing can be random. This is quite a shock to us. So there's no sentient being we meet that we haven't met before. There's no sentient being we meet that does good things to us that we haven't done good things to before. There's no sentient being we meet who does bad things to us that we haven't done bad things before. This is called the karma, called the experiences similar to the cause. So you might have a mummy who's kind and loving and generous and forgiving and wise due to your past actions, like that to her. Up until now, we've probably met countless beings, including the rats and the roaches. And whatever they do to you, that's called experiences similar to the cause. Whose cause? Your cause. The fourth way karma ripens is even called environmental, even the very way the physical world impacts upon us. Again, all I'm doing is speaking the simplest principles here. This is dealt with an incredible depth in all the literature. Anybody who's seriously studying Buddhism studies this stuff. Are we communicating here? So what Buddha's saying is, these seeds were triggered before I even stopped breathing in the past life. And then when I did die, like I said, they describe very detailed the way you die when the consciousness leaves your body, and then eventually when mummy and daddy hopped into bed, or wherever they hopped, your consciousness imprinted with these seeds ran like a magnet, zapped into the egg and sperm, and that's when conception starts. And off you go, becoming the person that you produced, experiencing the results of your past actions, all the good and all the bad. Not punishment, not reward, because there's no punisher and no rewarder. This is the Buddha's view. So of course, again, the implication of all this is that we're in charge, we're the boss. So it stops. If we really do take this on board, and I can say this with certainty in my own life, because when I first heard these Buddhist ideas, this is the one that really I found very compelling. Really like this, really like to understand karma, really try seriously in my life to take this on board as a basis for interpreting my life and therefore living my life. Because this view is a fundamentally different view that brings very different experiential consequences and psychological results, because what we don't realise is that we're all walking around with our own head full of philosophical positions about why things happen. We don't question them, We just assume we didn't ask to get born. We just assume it's not my fault. We just assume things are random. We assume that suffering shouldn't happen to me. We assume happiness should happen to me, and we don't question those assumptions. In a sense, Buddha's demanding we must, because these are the assumptions we've got now are all wrong. Not moralistically wrong, just practically. He's suggesting that. It's up to us. So I find using this as my basis in my life, liking this philosophy, attempting to live according to it, that it brings enormous psychological results. Less victim, less blame, less guilt, less fear, less anger, less attachment. Like a friend of mine, Tibetan monk, back in 87, he was one of the, they had their first kind of mini uprising in Tibet since 59 in Tibet. And it was mostly the young monks and nuns. They were the radicalised ones, So then they were all demonstrating, and then there was a big uprising, they got arrested, and he got tortured and everything. And he was telling me about it. He escaped to Kathmandu, our monastery there. And at some point, it was interesting, he said that his mother and father decided to make many Tibetans, so they had 13 babies, Hasn't done much good. There's about 10 times more other people there now than Tibetans. Never mind. So he became a monk, and then he was demonstrating, got arrested, then got tortured, whatever, then escaped, then his brother got murdered, father got murdered, etc., etc. So he was kind of sad, And I said to him, just casually, I said, did you ever get angry, Jindal? And equally casually, he laughed and said, what do you mean angry, Robina? What for? It's our own fault. Now, we hear those words, that's so heavy we can't believe it. It sounds so heavy. Our own fault. He was just talking casually. He just meant it's karma, Robina. He just talked ordinary language, So this is the point that's quite shocking to us, but it takes time to process. And it's the point I'm trying to make. Let's look at our assumptions in our mind now. Our assumption, because that's our materialist model, it's our scientific view, it's our psychological view, and the Buddha would say it's our ego's view, is that we're this innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, that everything is random, no one knows why things happen, there is no reason why bad things happen, and then how dare that happen to me? And I think that alone, that view alone, is why we have so much suffering. We don't know why things happen. We have no answer to why things happen. I'm not asking you to believe Buddha's view. Keep remembering. I'm just using the Buddha's view in this room. So we assume it's random. We assume there is no logic to why a child who did no wrong would be abused, or why one young Tibetan monk would get arrested and tortured. Or why, in other words, look at the world, look at the intensity of the suffering, the grossest suffering of bad things happening to innocent people. This is one of the most powerful things that freaks us out completely. It seems so unbelievably unjust. We can't comprehend it. Okay, Christians have a view that God has a plan. If you really have faith in God, or a Muslim, and I'm not criticising this view, I think this view is incredible. If you really have faith in God, my feeling is, based on the Christian teachings, my interpretation is that if God really is the creator, then God does know everything, and God has an infinite perfect plan. He knows exactly what he's doing. Then you would have total faith in God, and that means you would not get angry. You would accept. I think that is beyond profound, frankly. I'm not criticising it. How dare I? And the consequence of that is what? Happiness, peace. This Muslim couple, I remember reading in the paper a few years ago, when one of those Asian airlines crashed, and they're all Muslims. And this Muslim couple, I think in Kuala Lumpur, they were asked, how do you feel about the death of your daughter? And they said, she belongs to God. He has taken her back. We are content. Now, I would never criticise that. I think that's a profound way to live your life. And I mean that because, look, the point of this is what? The consequences of it. The experiential consequences of that is that they were peaceful. Well, the bottom line is, think, please. I don't give a damn in a sense what you think. If it makes you peaceful, be peaceful. That's a consequence. The consequence, Buddha's point is that what we think, and therefore what we do and say, is what causes us to be peaceful, or causes us to be tortured and suffering. That's all Buddha is saying, that our thoughts and our assumptions and our viewpoints are the source of our happiness and the source of our suffering. So the Jigdal's view is it's due to karma. That's in the bones of Tibetans. That's just their view. Has been for centuries. Has been that way in India before the Buddhists came along. It's the world view in that part of the world, which is new to us, unknown to us. It's a philosophical position. It's a philosophical view of the universe. So living with that view, of course you wouldn't get angry, because listen to the philosophical view that underpins anger. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. Now equally, when something good happens, let's say Lucas meets me and is kind to me, and I've never met him before, and he gives me $100. Now, equally, I don't deserve that either, do I? I didn't do anything to deserve it, did I? It's exactly the same with a bad thing, but we don't care about the good. Hey, give me more, please, mate. I deserve good. We have this deep assumption we deserve good and don't deserve bad. We ought to analyse that assumption. Buddha says it's got no rationale at all. It's like looking in your bank and seeing $0 and going, how dare there be no dollars in my bank? I deserve dollars. We would be laughed at if we said that, because we know what's in our bank is the fruit of our past work. We know in your garden, you don't say, how dare there be weeds in my garden, because you know it's your garden. You take responsibility. The same with karma, Buddha says. Our life is our garden, he's saying. And whatever's in it, whatever happens, whatever we see, taste, touch, smell, whatever happens to us, it is not a random event. It is the fruit of our past actions. So when we can own the good ones, we can own the fact that we're a human. It's like we won the lottery. We own the fact that we have a job and a bit of money and a bed at least to lie on, and reasonable sanity and reasonable kind people and reasonable this and that. It's like a miracle. It's the fruit of phenomenal past hard work, phenomenal virtue. We'd be so blissed out, like the veggies in your garden, like the dollars in your bank. You know it's the fruit of your hard work, so you're delighted with it. You don't just take the dollars for granted. You don't take the veggies for granted. Karma's exactly like that. But because we have this deep, ego-based, nonsense view, what it says, an assumption, deep in our bones, that I deserve good and I don't deserve bad. Better to put it, I want the nice things and I don't want the bad things. That's a fact. But we extrapolate and say deserve good, deserve bad. That's not logical. There's no logic whatsoever to that. Because it assumes there's no cause. You don't deserve money in your bank. We know it's the result of your hard work. We don't deserve vegetables in your garden. We know it's the result of our hard work. We don't deserve good health. We know it's the result of our hard work. We don't deserve happiness. It's the result of our virtue. We don't not deserve suffering. It's the fruit of our non-virtue. It's the same logic, but because we've got a different kettle of fish with morality and punishment and reward, we can't hear it like this. So this makes you responsible. That's why Digdol laughed, casually. That's why when I always quote this story too, in 2003, so I've been based in the States since like 94 or something, you know. I became an American in 2006. And I asked her if I could keep my other passports, because I've also got Australian and British. And she said, we don't mind how many passports you have, but as long as you have allegiance for the United States. So I'm trying to train myself to feel like an American. I don't know if I don't act like an American, I'm not sure. You understand? Anyway, I became an American. So 94, I came here in 94, what am I saying? 2003, right, and the prison project had been going since 96. Were some of you here last night? Remember the guy who's sitting on the corner here? That was AJ. He was the first guy who wrote to me. He was, when he was 16, it was in Pelican Bay. Top security, heavy-duty prison in California. Oh, we're here in California. Oh, we're here. Yeah, right. Sorry. I forget where I am. So anyway, he wrote a letter. He read a book of Lamieshi's, and he was 18 at the time. He told me he'd been in adult prison, 3 life sentences since he was 16, and then he'd been in juvenile since he was 12. So he really has been in prison since he's 12. He's now 40. He got out 2 months ago. I was so happy. I can't tell you. First time I'd seen him properly. We went for a meal last night. He's doing so well, he's unbelievable. Just a young gangster, you know, I don't remember wherever the gangs go around here, down there somewhere. And he's, the heavy sentencing here. Things are changing a bit now with Jerry Brown, I think, I'm not sure. They won't with Mr. Trump, will they? So sad. Anyway, he's an amazing human being, but he started this prison project. He wrote a letter to me, and I sat there and I answered it eventually, sent him a book, and then I sent another book, and then I visited him, and then another guy wrote, and within a year I had 40 people writing, you know, and then it grew from there. It's an amazing project, Liberation Prison Project. He was the first, he was the start. He's doing so well, I'm so happy. He's in this place near Culver City, I think, or Venice or somewhere. He found a lawyer, was able to help him, he got out. He'd be still sitting there otherwise. There's so many in this awful, the sentencing that happens in this state is unbelievable. Anyway, when I was working with the Prison Project, it was 2003, and Richard Gere had invited the Dalai Lama to New York, and he wanted to collaborate on inviting some prisoners. So in the end he did his own thing, but he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison. And a few of our friends who we'd helped, who had gotten out of prison, they were invited. And some people like me were invited, who work with people in prison. So it was this very marvellous day. They had a meeting all day. They met the Dalai Lama. It was a wonderful day. Lots of communicating and talking, and it was a whole cross-section of Americans, like male, female, Puerto Rican, Mexican, black, white, so on. So Richard also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns who'd been tortured and sexually abused for a couple of years in Lhasa. So of course they were telling their story, and it was very moving because they were very quiet, tears, but no anger, and that puzzles us in our culture. This needs a lot of thinking about it, honestly it does. And the point is why they didn't have anger. So that's the thing, I think we don't necessarily think this. We just take anger for granted. We take jealousy for granted. We have all these, and all Buddha's saying is that all these emotions we have are based on a series of assumptions. Anger is a habit. It's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Attachment is the result of the deepest delusion, ego grasping, this primordial instinctive sense of an I, and this is the stuff we're going to get into in more depth after lunch. So all this stuff is built up habits based on a series of misconceptions. And the Buddha's biggest one is the conception that I didn't ask to get born, that it's not my fault. We don't, so of course the materialist view reinforces that mummy and daddy did create me. Therefore, from that perspective, it is absolutely true to say that you didn't ask to get born, and therefore it is true to say if someone harms you without you doing anything to deserve it, then you don't deserve it. Therefore, anger is a good and healthy response. It's a logical conclusion. But so the same conclusion should be, though, when Lucas, out of the blue, for me causing it, my not creating any cause, gives me $100. But I don't deserve it. I didn't do anything to deserve this. But we don't ask that because we don't care, because we want the good things and we don't want the bad things. That's the real point, which is aversion or anger when bad things happen. How dare that happen to me? And then the other one is attachment. So please give me another $100. I don't care if I deserve it or not. We call one good luck and we call one bad luck. Well, Buddha says that's complete superstition. It's like thinking a rose is just good luck. No cause, no one knows why roses, no one knows why weeds. That's how Buddha would say this is the way we are right now. He says a natural law that runs the universe. So we better learn it, so we can control it. So we can guarantee that we sow seeds that will produce happiness, and we can pull out the seeds that will produce suffering. That's the basis of Buddhist practice. It happens in the mind, it's done by the mind, but that's the reason to practice morality in Buddhism, first and foremost for one's own sake. Self-preservation, it's like protection for yourself. Then, on the basis of this, you look at the rest of the world and you go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. And then you have such compassion for others, and then you're qualified to help others. This is the idea. Buddhist view about karma. So due to past actions, people harm us. Due to past actions, ours, they are helpful to us. But again, we love it if people are kind to us. We don't ask why. But we can't stand when bad things happen. So we agonize. Why is this happening to me? And I think that one, which is anger, is the source of why we go crazy. So these young Tibetan nuns didn't have that question. Jigdrol didn't have that question because it happens to be for them, they have an answer. It happens to be those 2 Malaysian parents had an answer. Now it's up to us to decide which one we think is right or wrong. It's up to us to find out because we're talking facts here, not beliefs. It's up to us to decide, work it out. That's up to us. So these young women were telling their story, right? They were, sexually abused and tortured for a couple of years. So it's clear to all the Americans that it's fairly evident if you wanted to quantify suffering, theirs probably was worse than everybody else's in one sense. But the other one that was shocking, like I said, they weren't angry, they were quiet and peaceful. sad but not angry, because this is the reason, because in their mind they have the view of karma, so they don't ever have the question, why is this happening to me? And that is the source, as I'm saying, of so much of our unbelievable pain and suffering in our lives, because we don't know why things happen. Now, I'm not clairvoyant, I can't tell you with certainty karma is true, but it's my working hypothesis until I am clear. Good enough, you know. So at least that's an answer. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, in my own life I can say that. Taking this as my view that I seriously try to use to interpret the world, then it has lessened my anger. It has lessened my attachment. No question, I'm not trying to show off. I'm trying to show the logic of it. Because our minds now are full of these philosophical positions, but we don't even think they are. We just think they're the truth. We just think whatever I feel is the truth. We're so ingrained with our views. And that's why Buddha's demanding we unpack and unravel the contents of our mind. Question, layers, ever more subtle layers and layers and layers of assumptions. And this is what he says we can do radically to reconfigure our mind, to turn it into this marvellous, blissful, kind, loving, compassionate, non-attached, not angry, non-jealous, non-neurotic mind. That's what he says our potential is. Hard work. The hardest job we'll ever do. But this is his trick. That's his deal. So these young women, in the end, were tears, you know, and then one of them quietly said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we knew we must have harmed them in the past, and of course, because they will suffer in the future for what they did to us. That's the basis in Buddhism for compassion. Karma is the basis of unbelievable compassion for others. But don't rush there. That's too advanced. We've got to start having compassion for ourselves first, to realise that we are the creators of our own reality. Not just now, but over a long period. This is Buddha's deal. So it's like compassion for yourself. That's why you stop eating sugar, because you're sick of suffering and you don't want diabetes. That's why you stop killing, lying, stealing, because you're sick of suffering and don't want things to happen to you that are bad. And you want happiness. So it's like kindness to yourself. That's the basis of properly using karma, which takes time to have that.